10 of the Council on Foreign Relations writes that arms sales to Saudi Arabia allow for the best hope of preventing a nuclear arms race in the region, as American arms sales make it easier for Saudi to feel secure. Christopher Blanchard, 18 of the Congressional Research Service, concludes that leaders from both countries view arms sales as a symbolic commitment to cooperation, as they remain the one constant during the controversial alliance. Moreover, Kurdistan finds that arms sales allow for the Saudi Air Force to outclass Iran's forces, disincentivizing the development of nuclear weapons. However, affirming destroys this balance, as Yoel Guzianski, 15 of the Washington Quarterly, finds that if Saudi Arabia questions the American security umbrella, it would obtain its own nuclear capabilities to gain security. Jeffrey Lewis, 15 of Foreign Policy, concludes that Saudi Arabia already has the capability to acquire nuclear weapons, but has only refrained from doing so because of the United States security commitment. A nuclear arms race in the Middle East has two impacts, and the first is increasing the likelihood of conflict. Horowitz 09 writes that when nuclear arms are quickly introduced into a tense situation, war becomes 67% more likely, because both sides become overconfident and emboldened. Second is increasing the likelihood of nuclear war. Edelman 11 Foreign Affairs concludes that if Saudi Arabia obtained nuclear weapons, it would increase the chance of miscalculation, potentially triggering a nuclear war. Worse still, he finds that Saudi Arabia might lose control over the weapons or nuclear material, and that non-state actors could gain access to these items. Thus, a nuclear arms race could lead to hundreds of millions of innocent people dying. Contention 2 is securing trade. Clifton Parker, 18 of the Hoover Institute, writes that Saudi Arabia remains the most important counterweight to Iran in the Middle East. James Phillips, 18 of the Heritage Foundation, finds that seizing arms sales would directly undermine the Saudi coalition, and more importantly, give a boost of confidence to Iran. Thus, Mohammed Al-Yahya, 18 of the Hill, concludes that an abrupt termination of the war would leave Iran in control of Yemen, giving them the ability to obstruct trade and oil flows in the Bab el-Mandab Strait, which they have already threatened to do. Kurdistan 10 of the Council on Foreign Relations writes that Saudi arms sales will holistically help ensure the security of oil tankers and other shipping in the region. Protecting the Bab el-Mandab Strait is crucial, as Luke Coffey, 18 of the Heritage Foundation, finds that 4.7 billion barrels of oil pass through this trade route every day. Thus, Tippy, 17 of the Oil and Gas Journal, finds that blocking the waterway, or even giving the ability to block the waterway temporarily, would substantially increase world energy prices. This has two major impacts, and the first is causing a global recession. Because oil is a crucial component in the production of most goods, increasing the price of oil also increases the overall cost of doing business, thus hurting the economy. Kevin Clayson, 10 of the St. Louis Fed, quantifies that just a 13% increase in oil prices increases the probability of a recession by 90% after just 2 years. That's why Taft 16 finds that an oil price spike has preceded 10 of the last 11 American recessions. Sadly, France 16 of the Telegraph concludes that the last economic downturn killed over 500,000 people due to lost access to healthcare. Moreover, Tufts University in 2012 finds that the last recession also pushed 100 million people into poverty. Second is exacerbating world hunger. Grosskopf of Schwartz writes in 2016 that food security is heavily contingent on the price of oil, which is required for fertilizer manufacturing, farm machinery, and food transportation costs. Grosskopf ultimately quantifies in 2014 that cutting oil prices in half will reduce malnourishment by 14%, feeding 110 million people. Luckily, Olson 19 writes that in the end of 2018, oil prices dropped 38%. Unfortunately, affirming and giving Iran the ability to close the Bab el-Mandab Strait would spike oil prices and reverse this progress. Thus, we negate.
And I see, one, Iran's going to do it again because America cuts off arms sales. B,
Like the Strait?
Yeah, the Mandab el-Bab.
Yeah.
And then specifically, the link evidence that ties them closing the strait into a global recession.
Okay.
Yeah. And ideally, could I read it during my partner's speech? If not, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't need it for prep, but
Yeah, that's fine.
No, it's saying like oil prices. Sure.
Wait, what's the rate of oil prices?
It's 13%, that's what's on here.
Yeah.
Are we ready? Starting time now. We affirm resolve the United States should end all arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Our sole contention is a new Vietnam. Martin of the Globe and Mail 16 explains that in 2016, Saudi Arabia significantly began aggressively projecting power to overtake Iran as Middle Eastern hegemon. Wiseman of Cypri 18 finds a correlation between Saudi Arabian weapon imports, which spiked in the last 5 years, and their increasingly aggressive behavior, concluding that it is arms acquisition that will make force increasingly an attractive option for Saudi Arabians. Even before Khashoggi's murder, Saudi Arabia has undermined peace and democracy in the volatile region. Norman of Salon 16 explains that they have spent over $100 billion exporting Wahhabism, blockading Qatar, and as Barnard of the New York Times 17 explains, literally detaining the Prime Minister of Lebanon. But the best example is their genocidal intervention in Yemen. Ali of CFR 15 explains that the Yemeni war started in 2003 when the Houthis, a political movement that sought to protect and revive Zaini Islam religious and cultural traditions, took up arms against the corrupt, oppressive Hadi government in a classic case of ballot or bullet. Since then, Al Jazeera 18 quantifies that through warfare, 50,000 people have been killed, 3 million have been displaced, 14 million are on the verge of starvation, 10,000 people are infected with cholera every week, at the same time as ISIL and Al-Qaeda gain ground amongst the chaos. However, America-backed Saudi aggression exacerbates the conflict and precludes a political solution for 3 reasons. First, you cannot kill an ideology with firepower, as Erdos of Al Jazeera 18 explains. Only a political solution will solve the conflict because, for the Houthis, this war is about preserving the core of their identity. Second, Rydell of Brookings 17 explains that the Houthis were radicalized in 2003 when the corrupt Hadi government supported the U.S. invasion of Iraq. Thus, continued intervention only fuels the Houthi narrative of being victims of U.S. imperialism. This is bad because, as Leaf of War Rocks 18 explains, the Houthis are currently factionalized and ready for negotiations. However, indiscriminate Saudi bombings empower radical Houthis while converting peace-seeking moderates, making negotiations impossible. Third, pivot to Iran. Bazi of Atlantic 18 explains that Saudi Arabia intervened in Yemen to prevent Iran, who they thought funded the Houthis, from establishing a proxy state in their backyard. Yet, Bazi continues that Iran funded the Houthis after Saudi Arabia intervened. Yet, the Houthis are not and never have been an Iran proxy. They're a cultural group with their own political interests. Leaf continues that the Houthis are increasingly willing to break their stride with Iran because their relationship with Iran is built out of perceived Saudi aggression. In fact, the Houthis have expressed a willingness to negotiate with Saudis for peace. And as Johnson of Security 18 explains, when Saudi Arabia ramps up their aggression, the Houthis will seek more support from Iran, concluding that continued military action only prolongs the conflict indefinitely. Therefore, the only way to achieve peace is by cutting arms sales. According to Spencer of the Times 2 days ago, the recently negotiated ceasefire focused on opening Yemen to humanitarian aid is actually on the verge of collapsing after Saudis bombed the Hodeidah port. In fact, Al Jazeera finds 4 hours ago that a Houthi Hadi meeting this morning acknowledged the fragility as a result of political disagreements over who has authority over the city of Hodeidah. Yet, a French of the National Review 18 explains that if Saudi military is dependent on American support on land and air, finding that if America cuts sales, Saudi Arabia can't switch to another nation's weaponry without suffering massive setbacks in readiness and effectiveness. Indeed, Doucet of BBC 18 finds that even during the ceasefire, Saudi officers are calling for more military pressure on the Houthis, which is why Saudis are seeking peace through negotiations, which, as Leaf continues, is through the Houthis, who want a political solution to the conflict. Affirming is crucial because with America's unconditional support, Saudi Arabia wants to end the war by eliminating the Houthis. However, as French explains, if America cuts arms sales, we would show that our support is conditional, forcing the Saudis to fundamentally change their calculus because they cannot afford any vulnerability, especially when Saudi and Iran are in an arms race. Let's move on.
My favorite first question.
Yes. And go.
So you tell us in the case that the buying of arms increases Saudi aggression, right?
Yes.
How do you know it's not the other way around? Like they're getting more aggressive, so they're trying to buy more guns.
No. So what we're telling you, right, is a couple of different things. First, it's buying of arms, but the U.S. backing it, right? Because we give you our second link that tells you that.
Sure, I'm talking about your first link right now.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we're telling you that for the Houthis, this battle is ideological, right? So they're going to fight to the end. So insofar as we keep getting arms and Saudi Arabia keeps intervening, that's the root cause of the
Okay,
conflict.
so what happens when we stop intervening?
When we stop intervening, Saudi Arabia is no longer challenging the Houthis' right to exist, and they're not going to push for any sort of violence.
So
We'd say that's the solution.
So do the Houthis win in Yemen?
Huh?
Do the
I mean,
Houthis like have?
Okay, but there's two scenarios, right? I mean, either the Houthis win or Saudi Arabia kill off the Houthis.
No, I'm saying like in your world.
Yeah.
Where Saudi Arabia can't kill.
I mean, ideally, yeah, the Houthis win.
Okay, awesome. You
But no, yeah, so I have a follow-up, right? I have a question based on that, right? So, is Yemen a proxy state for Iran?
like a proxy Yemen, right?
Is Yemen a proxy state for Iran?
No, because
No.
those are the proxy for
No, so then why okay, so your Hill card literally says that you would leave Iran in Yemen. So that's not true.
Wait, leave Iran and Yemen?
Your Hill card literally says word for word that the end of the war would leave Iran in Yemen.
Sure, but like Iran
That only
wants-
happens
Iran wants
if
to
wait.
be-
That only happens if Iran has a proxy state in Yemen, correct?
No, because Iran
What?
would like stay there, they want
Wait,
regional
to
Yemen.
stay there, they have to have already
No,
been established
not
there
if the
through a
Houthis take
political
over.
party.
Not if the Houthis take over, because the Houthis
Wait.
are backed by Iran.
Yes,
Like,
so it's a proxy state.
You're sort of
Wait.
conflating like Yemen and the Houthis. The
Wait.
Houthis are a proxy for Iran. Yemen is a
Houthis
proxy
live in
for
Yemen.
Saudi Arabia.
Wait. So Houthis are backed by Iran, correct?
Sure, yeah.
So if we prove that the Houthis are not backed by Iran, not that they're not backed by Iran, but that they're
Yeah,
not
not
going
the same
to
thing,
but they're not supporting Iran. That if they get power, they're not going to be tied to Iran. Do we automatically turn that impact on it on itself?
Sort of which impact?
Your impact on trade.
Like no, because that's not the entire area. Like if
Okay.
Iran can still get into that one in the strait.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Do you have a question?
Yeah, so you tell us that like American pressures will radicalize the Houthis, right?
Yes.
Does that mean if we take American pressure out, they get like unradicalized?
No. So let me explain. American pressures will radicalize the Houthis, but the core of their identity is still peace-loving. So insofar as that's true, America leaving only ensures that
What's
they're going
the
to be
Houthi slogan?
Huh?
What's the Houthi slogan?
Tell me.
I'd rather not say in this room, but basically they say that they want to kill all the Jews, they want death to America, and like.
And that's an effective American intervention that solved for Americans.
What do you want to start?
It's gonna be an overview and then down there, please. You guys ready?
Which side do I fill the order
On
on?
top of this. We need a couple seconds time.
Yeah.
Alright. That was 6 seconds. Alright, nothing more. Starts. Yeah. The status quo is currently solving the conflict. Winter 19 of The Guardian reports 5 days ago that the Yemen ceasefire is holding and that Saudi Arabia remains intent on reaching a negotiated end to the 4-year civil war. Furthermore, Martin Griffiths, the UN special envoy for the country, said that there's been an absence of offensive military operations in the territory and that a lack of Saudi Arabian airstrikes. But even more recently, Al Jazeera reports yesterday that the Yemen government and Houthi rebels met on a UN ship to discuss a truce. Finally, Rishad 19 writes 1 hour ago that Saudi Arabia and Houthi leaders plan to meet tomorrow to discuss a prisoner exchange. This is proof of continued diplomacy over the past week. But critically, this would end when you vote for the affirmation. They're trying to make the argument that the Houthis will not stop fighting because it's ideological, but understand that if they're getting beat on the battlefield, that's when they have to negotiate, and that's when they find a truth. That's when they negotiate for a truce. That's why Karam 18 the national states that the only reason that Houthis are coming to the table right now and are willing to negotiate is because of battlefield losses and military pressure across Yemen. That's the only chance it solves. However, this stops when you affirm, because they say in case that when you affirm, Saudi Arabia's military is weakened and they're no longer able to oppose the Houthis. At this point, the Houthis are going to push more for hegemony. That's when they're going to take Yemen, and that's really bad for a bunch of reasons. Now, their thesis for their case is that American pressure radicalizes the Houthis. Sure, this may be true, but understand that removing American pressure doesn't make the Houthis go back to their peace-loving ways. They've currently been radicalized, and they will stay that way. But furthermore, let's go over the 4 reasons why the Houthis gaining control of Yemen and Saudi Arabia's military being weakened would be really bad. The first is because this concedes the link to our second contention. The Bab al-Mandab Strait runs through Yemen, so if Saudi Arabia can no longer fight and protect this strait, that's when the Houthis gain control, that's when Iran gains the ability to close the strait and hike up the price of oil. The second reason is conceded in this round is that it leads to the Houthis winning the war. They tell you in case Saudi Arabia wouldn't be able to fight. At this point, the Houthis take over the region. The National Post writes in 2018 that the Houthis want to commit a genocide of the Baha'i people in Yemen. This is a huge impact in this round on irreversibility, because we can always fix the conflict in Yemen, but what we can't fix is a genocide. When you vote for the affirmation and the Houthis gain control of Yemen, they commit a genocide of the Baha'i people. This is irreversible, leads to the extermination of a culture. The third reason why affirming and giving Houthis control of Yemen is really bad is because it decreasing Saudi Arabia's terrorism fighting capabilities. Simon 17 writes that Saudi Arabia is one of the leading combatants of terrorism in the Middle East right now. Ending arms sales to Saudi Arabia would decrease their ability to fight terrorism and their will to for two reasons. The first is if they don't have US arms anymore, they can no longer use weapons to fight terrorists. And the second is a decreased cooperation with the United States. They say this themselves. If Saudi Arabia isn't working with the United States anymore, that decreases their incentive to fight terrorism. But fourth and finally, it's because the Houthis steal food aid. The World Food Program finds this Monday that starving residents of the Houthi-controlled capital Sana'a have not been getting UN food rations that they're entitled to because the Houthis instead sell this food for guns. At this point, when the Houthis gain more control of Yemen when you affirm, the Houthis continue to sell this food, stop from getting to the Yemen citizens. It exacerbates the famine, and that's why this is an easy vote for the negation.
Before I give my speech, is any of my judges or opponents not okay with speed? And
Wait, how fast?
if I go too fast, can you go there? Everybody else there? So the order is going to be on their overview / whatever they read on our case, then back to their case. I just want to run a second. Is everybody ready?
Start on their overview that the status quo is solving. Recognize we read you in case. Spencer of Times from 2 days ago, its post states their card that Saudi Arabians resumed the bombing campaign in the ceasefire city of Rudaida. That means that clearly the ceasefire is working. They try to tell me that they met on a ship to discuss peace, but if you call for the evidence, it literally says that the result of that meeting on the ship, literally both sides acknowledge that the ceasefire is very fragile and about to collapse. That means that the status quo is not solving. They try to tell that Houthis only negotiate when they're being beat on the battlefield, but recognize that's not true because you cannot eliminate an ideology by killing everybody. The only way you eliminate an ideology is by essentially killing everybody off. That's tantamount to genocide. We would say we prefer a political solution that only happens when you affirm. That's because we tell that as long as America and Saudi Arabia continue bombing and intervening in the region, the Houthis will never be able to negotiate. That's for a couple of reasons. First, recognize that the Houthis were initially radicalized by the American intervention, but right now there exists a massive faction within the Houthis that want to seek peace. In fact, the leaders of the Houthis want to seek peace. However, as long as bombing campaigns continue in the status quo, and as long as Saudi Arabian bombing is resumed in the status quo, that emboldens the Houthis. The evidence is very good on this. But even if you don't buy that, we tell you that at the point where you embolden the radicals, they're the ones who are standing in the way of peace, and they're the ones that are like threatening to take over the strait. That means that we solve back for the root cause on their conflict about Yemen. But specifically on the analysis that they give you about how the Houthis are worse than the Saudis. First, recognize that the Saudis are literally actively committing genocide against the Houthis, but you prefer our evidence, and the reason this is because the Guardian finds that as a result of Saudi Arabia's indiscriminate airstrikes on civilian centers and food aid and things like hospitals, the genocide and cholera and diseases spilling over to the rest of the Yemeni people, meaning that you can't prefer the Houthis and the Saudis. We would contend that they're both bad actors in the situation, but specifically they say that we stop, like specifically on their terrorism point, that the terrorism turned into one case. First, AP, Associated Press 18 finds that Saudi Arabia actively supports terrorism in the region. In fact, they find that they literally funnel American weapons through Al-Qaeda. They've done this in Syria, they're doing this in Yemen. There's no reason to believe that Saudi Arabia has an interest in destroying terrorist organizations, considering their ideology is very similar to those exact terrorist organizations. Cross-apply what they said about food aid. Saudi Arabia destroys food aid too. We prefer the solution. Go on to their case about proliferation. First, Saudi Arabia will never fully develop nuclear weapons. There are too many obstacles in the way. Tommy 13. Saudi Arabian establishment is too conservative to undertake such a bold step and difficult to imagine the House of God deliberately position themselves as global allies and inviting replies from countries capable of inflicting serious damage. The economic diversification campaign will require sustained gaming with the rest of the world, it is not rational that they would jeopardize this in favor of nuclearizing. But the alternative, PT18 explains that Saudi Arabia America is literally giving Saudi Arabia an easy path to nukes. Saudi Arabia is reaching to America to help develop their nuclear program at the same time as the Trump administration has A, publicly supported it because it would bolster the nuclear domestic industry in America, but secondly, plans to relax restrictions on uranium enrichment activities. But then you deal in turn it again. J-Post 18 explains that Saudi Arabia literally doesn't have the domestic ability to even produce cars, much less the industrial base to do nuclear reactors, nevertheless nuclearized. The only way that they even get the nuclear reactors in the first place is through American support, and then you delink them because their own evidence says that they won't develop a nuclear weapon unless Iran develops a nuclear weapon first, and that doesn't happen because there are still the Iran deal is still enforced by like countries like Britain, even if America pulled out of it. Go on to their second contention. Recognize that first it's already happened. The Foreign Policy 17 explains that Iran should have already been emboldened enough to take any action that they're talking about because of the defeat over the American and Saudi coalition in Syria. But secondly, there's an alt cause. The Guardian 18 explains that the reason that Iran is actually threatening to cut off oil supplies and blockade the straits is simply because of the threat of American sanctions. At that point, it's totally alt cause. But even if you don't buy that, Down News 14 explains, delinks them entirely, that the Iran Minister of Oil literally said that he wants to keep the price of oil at $60 a barrel because that's most economically profitable. The weighing analysis here is simple. It's that Iran knows that if they raise oil prices, they're going to jeopardize the whole economy. That includes them as well, so they have no incentive to do it. But even if you don't buy that, we actually question the strength of link. Vox EU 11 says that even if oil prices increase, the spillover to a larger recession is not causative, it's simply correlative. In fact, they find that it has maximum impact on world economies is 0.3 to 0.8% of GDP growth, meaning they never access the impacts of a recession anyways.
We see the card that Saudi Arabia is committing genocide right now?
Yeah.
What am I saying about earlier? Start time now. So you guys said that Saudi Arabia supports terrorism basically by bribing terrorists, right?
Right. Saudi Arabia literally gives money and weapons and support to terrorist organizations because their ideology is very similar.
Okay, but will you also agree that they sometimes fight terrorists?
I would contend that that's all perceptual. They want to be known as a supporter of terrorism, so they look like they're fighting.
Overall, when we take away weapons, that doesn't stop Saudi Arabia's ability to bribe terrorists. It only stops their ability to fight them, right?
No, because like you can see that it doesn't incapacitate their military capability. So
No, we said that it does incapacitate Saudi Arabia's military.
Right, exactly. So they still have enough weapons, which means
wait,
they
no,
give
we
up.
all agree that when the US pulls out, Saudi Arabia loses military capabilities.
Right. So why like for example, the millions of dollars of weaponry that they have, they can't give to terrorists.
Wait, no, they lose military capability. You guys read?
No, exactly, right. So here's the thing, right? We say that they lose military capability and that they can't use their like air force anymore. That doesn't mean that they don't have guns anymore, right? Like they can't continue bombing. But
No, they
still
still have their guns, but they can't get ammo. Like they can't when they can't buy
they can't get ammo. Why can't they
Wait,
get ammo?
isn't this your guys' case? That Saudi Arabia can't keep fighting when US
No,
pulls out?
specifically we say that Saudi Arabia can't keep bombing when US pulls out. Terrorists are not running like F-15s
Okay,
and
so
bombing.
Saudi Arabia
They're using
still has guns.
AK-47s.
So you guys are telling me that Saudi Arabia can keep fighting the Houthis even if the US pulls out arms?
No, they can't keep bombing the Houthis. The Saudi
Okay, but they
Arabians are
can
not
keep
on the
shooting them.
ground fighting the Houthis. The Saudi Arabians are bombing the Houthis. That's the
I'd say they're doing both. They're bombing them and shooting them.
No, that's not true, but sure. Can I ask you a question? Right. So, what's this argument about Iran blocking the Strait of? I can't pronounce the name.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, the Strait. So, right now, is the Strait open or closed?
The Strait is open.
Right now.
Yes.
Didn't the Houthis like control the Strait like 2 days ago?
No. Yemen and Saudi Arabia currently controls the Strait.
Right. Are the Houthis trying to gain control of the Strait right now?
Yes.
Right. So how does that change?
When you affirm they gain control, the Saudi Arabia can't protect it because they don't have weapons.
Right. So then my question is, what's the incentive for Iran to actually blockade that strait and prevent
You guys
oil?
told us yourselves to get back the United States for threatening to impose sanctions on Iran.
Wait. So they're going to. So this is because of the sanctions.
Yeah, that's why Iran was.
Right. So how does that change in either world?
No, it's not their motive to do so, it's their ability to do so. So you're right, they have the motive in both worlds, but they don't have the ability to right now. When Saudi Arabia loses arms, that's when they gain the ability to.
Right. So let's talk about when Iran supports the Houthis more, right? Because the Houthis are trying to take control of the strait right now, right?
Sure.
Iran does not have control of the strait right now.
No.
When do the Houthis rely more on Iran? When they are being bombed by the Saudis or when they are left to negotiate peace?
Like,
Right, because empirically, the Johnson analysis is very explicit that the Houthis only lean on the Iranians when they're being attacked. It's a reactive measure. So if we enter a long-term
not if the
political
Iranians
settlement,
have. So you guys agree that the Iranians have an incentive to close the strait. At that point, that's
No,
a
we don't.
separate motivation.
We read the
aside
Dow-
from-
we
at
read
that
the
point,
Dow evidence.
aside from Saudi Arabia attacking them, that's a separate motivation for Iran to
so
fund the Houthis to get the
so
strait.
first we don't concede. We read the Dow News evidence that says that the Iranian oil minister wants to keep the price per barrel of oil at 60 because that's best for their economy. So we don't concede that. But secondly, and more importantly, yeah.
We're gonna be their case, our case. Sorry. Anyone not ready? Time starts now. First game tells you that the status quo is solved, and they say it's not. They cited an article from 4 hours ago. We cited one from 2 hours ago showing that new talks are going on. Tomorrow they were going on yesterday, they're going on all the time. They might say that this won't actually lead to any success. We see that an attempt for peace talks is better than no attempt at all. That's what happens in their world. We tell you that Houthis are only negotiating right now because they're losing the battle. They say that that's not true. You have to like murder an entire ideology to do anything. It's literally not responsive. The logic is clear. Houthis are negotiating because they don't think they can win the war conventionally. That's why they're negotiating. When they think they can win, when Saudi Arabia has no guns, they're not going to want to negotiate. That links into the Houthis having control, which they can see to in first cross. But that, let's understand why Houthis are super bad. First, on genocide. They see that, first of all, they say like that Saudi Arabia is doing genocide too, meaning they fully concede that the Houthis are going to be committing genocide. Let's wait and see. Their article, their evidence doesn't really specify on genocide. They literally tell you it's indiscriminate killing. That's definitionally not genocide. Genocide is when you're discriminating against a certain group. We'd argue that's worse because at that point you're labelling literally an entire ethnicity as subhuman. That's not what they do. They tell you themselves it's indiscriminate. We say that the Houthis are worse. Next on terror. They tell you that the Saudi guns are like going towards Al-Qaeda. That's not true. Terrorism has gone down 40% in the Middle East and Northern Africa, and deaths have gone down 50%. This is towards like the last from like a week ago. Like this is all towards the end of 2018. That's the reason for this is because of support from the United States and Saudi Arabia fighting against terrorism in the region. If what they're telling you is true, we see increases as arms sales increase, which they tell you. The opposite is true. We're seeing terrorism deaths decrease because we're selling more arms. Finally, on aid, they sit across by Saudi Arabia. We literally show you in Games Rebuttal that right now, fully Houthi-controlled cities don't have access to food because the Houthis are stealing and selling aid. Saudi Arabia has nothing to do with this. Houthis are worse. Now move on to our case. First thing they tell you is that like they should have done before with their motivations. Then they also, on contention too, and oil. The first thing they tell you is that you want to have done it sooner because they already have motivations. The problem with this is that sure they already have motivations. That's literally what we're telling you. We're saying they don't have the ability to close down the strait. They close down the strait when Saudi Arabia doesn't have arms to block the strait because at that point they don't have like, the ability to go through. Then they tell you that Iran would never do it. But then they also literally tell you that they would do it because of sanctions. We can see their first point telling you that like they have the motivation for sanctions. Quickly on our first contention, we can see that there are evident nukes, like no terms go through. On our second contention, understand that the impact is very clear. If oil prices spike, we would see an increased chance of food insecurity because the price of oil is directly contingent on how much food costs because of transportation and creation. At that point, we're saving 100 million people from death from food insecurity for us.
Where is that?
so I'm going to be starting on Iran and then moving on to the case. Starting right now. Okay, so recognize that insofar as Iran already had a victory in Syria, we should have seen the impacts happen already, they haven't. But then, recognize that the only reason that they're even threatening is because of these US sanctions, they haven't really responded to that. But also extend the Voxier who tells you that the correlation between oil prices increasing and recessions is only correlative, not causal. But also extend the Johnson that tells you the Houthis are pivoting towards Iran when they're threatened. Insofar as that's true, they're literally threatening them, which means that they're going to give Iran control of the Strait. Now, come on to the issue of ceasefires. Recognize a couple of key things. One, the ceasefires ended a couple days ago because Saudi was bombing. They try to tell you that there's new talks in the way, but recognize that insofar as more bombing is only going to radicalize the Houthis, making them less prone to conflict in the long term, decreasing the likelihood of long-term security in the Middle East, that means that their talks in their world are always going to fail, but they're only going to work in our world, because in our world, extend the French 18 analysis that tells you that Saudi Arabia needs US military supplies. If we cut the sales, their air force will literally be grounded in a day. Insofar as that's true, we're the only people equalizing leverage. At that point, when we're equalizing leverage, we bring both parties equal to the negotiating table. That's the only way they're willing to solve the conflict. But then, extend the fact that the Houthis are a peace-loving people. They try to tell you that the Houthis are not willing to negotiate. Extend the fact that the leader himself said that they're willing to negotiate. That means that they're peace-loving. But also extend the fact that it was US radicalization, US intervention that directly caused the conflict. At that point, we directly pull out. That means we're going to make sure that these people who are peace-loving, want to end the conflict, are going to work with the Saudis. But recognize that insofar as they try to tell you that they try to make this argument about Saudi Arabia combating terror, but recognize, look to what has empirically happened. Empirically, Saudi Arabia has invested $100 million in Wahhabism, and empirically, Saudi Arabia has been giving weapons to Al Qaeda. At that point, the terrorists are arguing against it. They try to tell you terror deaths decrease. Recognize their terrorists are not specific to Yemen. Our terror deaths are specific to Yemen. But then recognize that Saudi Arabia commits worse human rights abuses than the Houthis, because Saudi Arabia discriminates against the Houthis and they indiscriminately bomb the Yemenis as well. But then also recognize that Bazi 18 tells you that the Houthis, even if they get control, because they're peace loving, they're not going to side with Iran. Extend the analysis that they're fundamentally different people.
You mind if I get the first question? Good. Alright, we'll start time now. If the Houthis are peace loving, why are they literally committing a genocide?
Okay,
So we would contend that that's not the case, right?
Right.
So we're saying that what's happening is that the Houthis started the war because they were denied political and cultural representation.
For sure. I'm not
Like,
talking
why
about
does that matter
I'm
right
not talking
now?
about like New York.
No, so let me clarify.
Why right now are the Houthis literally committing a genocide on Baha'i people?
Right.
Yeah, so
we dispute the cause of that, right?
No, so let me explain, right? So there's really two issues here. There is one, the core ideology of the Houthis, what that is. And then there's two, what has happened as a result of US intervention.
Okay.
And we both agree that as a result of US intervention, there are a lot of human rights abuses. Where we disagree is, we actually put forth a warrant, the core ideology of the Houthis is peace-loving. And that's evidenced empirically by the fact that their leader is coming out and saying that if Saudi bombings end, that they're actually willing to work towards
You
negotiations.
guys are telling me that the Houthis want to exterminate this religious group because the US is giving Saudi Arabia arms.
This is the nuance that is very important in this
Yeah,
story, right? The Houthis are not a monolith. The Houthis, there's a multitude of Houthi factions. Some are radicals that want to commit genocide, but some, and the majority, are peace-loving and they want negotiation.
But they're all-
When
Yeah,
it's
very
really
good.
good that you guys are saying this. Do you have any evidence that they don't want to commit a genocide? Is it that way?
Right. So
If
Yeah, I mean,
want
we have
to-
evidence
they
to
are,
go
yes, and they want peace.
Oh wait, so here's my question. Like, yeah, if you can have peace in like
Wait, your evidence is that they were peace loving?
They don't want peace. They don't want like war in Yemen. That's why they want full control of Yemen and to kill this minority.
No,
They've
no, no.
never wanted.
Yeah.
They wanted political representation. That is the root
No,
cause of the
so-
conflict.
Wait,
For
guys,
sure.
let's-
What does that have to do with killing the Baha'i people?
Right. So we're telling you that when you constantly bomb them, and when they see that they are victims of
They
US
take it out on
imperialism,
Baha'i.
the radical faction of the Houthis
Takes it
are
out on
empowered.
Well,
Wait,
let's
they
move
take
on
that
from
out
this,
from Baha'i.
right? So at the point, right, where more bombing is radicalizing the Houthis, right? At that point, why would peace talks ever work? I mean, even if this peace talk right now is going to work and there's going to be new talks, how do you ever ensure that these peace talks into anything productive? We've had 900 peace talk violations.
We can't promise that peace talks work, but we're
You can't.
talk
Right,
about
but
it.
so why do peace
The
talks
point is
fail?
that Houthis are only open to peace
Right.
talks when they're losing the war.
Right, but my question is, why do peace talks fail and have failed in the past?
I don't know.
They fail because Saudi Arabia refuses to cease bombing.
Okay,
During
will
the
you guys
ceasefire-
agree that eventually, if the Houthis keep getting beat on the battlefield, they can't keep fighting?
No. So it's
Why?
exactly the same thing as the Viet Cong in Vietnam. That's why the contention of our case, the name of our contention, is they knew Vietnam.
But here's
Because
what I
they
was-
are fighting for the preservation of their identity and culture.
Okay.
Which means that even if they have no
But-
territory,
If they
always
keep losing,
continue fighting.
won't Iran
Okay,
stop
so-
funding them when they
no,
don't
no,
have
no,
fun
no.
losing?
So
it?
couple
No,
of
because
things.
as they lose more, they pivot more towards Iran. And here's the
Yeah,
thing.
but Iran's going to pivot away from
Right,
that.
so this is basically the dilemma we present. You can either end the conflict by literally killing every last Houthi civilian and military,
That's bad because it's genocidal. Or you can end the conflict.
Okay, just one more thing I want to say, right? Just one more thing I want to say is that at the point where your warrant is that they're losing on the battlefield, that's the only time they're going to negotiate. And we give you an empirical warrant from the leader himself, where he says that the root cause of their negotiations is ending intervention.
Yeah, right now.
We have empirical evidence.
Okay,
You're just making
okay,
up points
for
of the
sure.
process.
Dude, the reason that he wants to end this conflict is because he's losing. If he was winning, he wouldn't want to give up that conflict. Okay, we're gonna try. Wait, don't want to see that evidence.
Oh yeah, the ultimate end of the war is to put a genocide.
Is political settlement?
The one that says that ending the war, the only way to end the war is to kill the Houthis.
No, we say
That's
the only way to end the war is
that's
to
an analytic.
political, yeah.
Okay. Alright, so we want to try it now.
Let's talk about whether or not peace talks are happening right now. We both agree they're happening. They say that they're dire and they're going to break apart. The point is that both sides are open to negotiation. That's really key because they never respond to the fact that the Houthis won't be open to negotiating when they think they have a chance of winning the conflict. That's because Peoria AFF, the national, says the only reason they're coming to the table is because they're getting beat on the battlefield. At the point where we affirm and Saudi Arabia can't keep fighting, that's when the Houthis think they can win. That's when they stop negotiating, and that prolongs the conflict. This is really key because they never contest the National Post in 2018 who tells you that if the Houthis gain control of Yemen, they will commit a genocide. We've already done weighing on this in every single peace speech. This is the largest impact around irreversibility. They try to compare the Saudi Arabians killing the Houthis and the indiscriminate killing of Yemeni citizens to this. And they try to call that a genocide. That's offensive to what a genocide is. Indiscriminate killings is not a genocide. The Saudi Arabians are not targeting people specifically. The Houthis are. Specifically, they drop this. There is an 100% probability of a genocide happening when you affirm. If that's not a round-ending drop, I don't know what is. You can sign your ballot for the affirmation, but for the negation right now. But the second place you can vote is on the Houthis stealing food aid. They try to call this a wash, but it really isn't. We read you uncontested evidence from the World Food Program that says that the starving residents are in areas that are controlled by the Houthis, because the Houthis are the ones stealing the aid and selling it for arms. The more control the Houthis gain over Yemen, the more food they sell, the more people go into famine. This is another clean place you can vote. But third, and finally the cleanest place, the place that was touched the least, is our case. The only thing they talked about is Iran's motivation to close the strait. And they say that Iran has motivation either way because of sanctions. We agree. The key difference is their ability to do so. When Saudi Arabia has arms, they're able to protect the strait and keep out the Houthis in Iran. But when they agree that Saudi Arabia can no longer fight when the US pulls out their arms, that's when the Houthis gain control, that's when Iran comes in. Then they're going to try to make this argument that the Houthis pivot more to Iran when we put more pressure on them. But our argument is that Iran's going to pivot away from the Houthis the more they lose. So at that point, the only risk of ending this conflict is in the negation. Finally, on closing the strait, we told you that it will increase the price of oil 13%, which will increase food insecurity for 500,000 people. At that point, this is a clean ballot for negation.
The order is going to be their case.
Starting on the argument about oil blockade, recognize that they misconstrue evidence. We tell them that the evidence says that Iran has threatened to close over the Strait of Hormuz because of US sanctions. However, we give you the empirical and not the empirical evidence. The down news evidence that explains that the oil minister himself has said that they're not going to want to raise prices above $60 a barrel because that's what's best for the economy. The impact, the warrant level analysis here goes uncontested that Saudi Arabia or Iran is not going to want to do anything that collapses the world economy because those hungry people will exist in Iran as well. But even if you don't buy that, they never respond to our terminal defense that says that all their evidence about how oil shocks cause these recessions is correlative and more important than the Oxy evidence evidence explains that there's a minimal impact on America, on every economy. At the end of the day, the maximum impact they actually is 0.8% of GDP, which isn't very good. But even if you don't buy that, they never respond to the term, and this is why we win this argument as well. The Johnson 17 term that explains that the only time that the Houthis pivot towards the Iranians is when they're getting bombed more. That means that solving the conflict in Yemen is a prerequisite, because if we have peace talks between the Houthis and the Houthis and we resolve the conflict, they're never going to gain access to this trade in the first place. Go on to the Yemen argument. We contend that there is only two ways to solve the Yemen argument. They say that when we beat down the Houthis, that's how we solve. But recognize a couple things. First, beating them on the battlefield will never solve the conflict first, because ideologically they want to preserve their culture. That's obvious. They want to preserve their culture. That's why they're fighting the war in the first place. No, they're going to keep fighting even if they lose every single piece of territory. They say that they're the only reason they're willing to negotiate. That's not true. We contend that the leaf evidence is very explicit that when bombings and warfare continue, the radicals of the Houthis are emboldened. These are the same radicals that they claim are committing the genocide, which means that we gain solvency for the genocide, because at the point where we lead to peace talks and empower the moderate Houthis, we prevent the radicals from exerting this influence. But even if you don't buy that, recognize that their weighing analysis on the Saudi genocide literally misses the mark entirely. We know that Saudi Arabians are committing genocide against the Houthis right now, but as a result of the fallout of their bombing raids, they're also indiscriminately killing everybody else. We literally outweigh on magnitude. We recognize that the Saudi Arabians are literally a well-armed, well-equipped force with fighter jets and planes, whereas the Houthis are a ragtag group of terrorists with AK or F-47. Saudi Arabians definitely have more capacity to commit a genocide, and they can see the analysis that genocide is the biggest impact in the round. They say ceasefire is working in SQO. Recognize that's literally not true, because Saudi Arabia resumed bombing in the SQO 2 days ago. Our evidence post-date this. The peace talks are doomed to perpetually fail because the root cause of the Houthi conflict, Saudi airstrikes, are not solved.